Valerie emailed me that she's out of town. I have not heard from Matt, but I was just saying to Chris, it's that time of the season that he's probably just huffing and puffing.
Very tense.
Yeah, Matt's been busy.
Is he? But we got a quorum and at least get started and get this thing done. So. Chuck, you about ready or a couple minutes? Or?
Yeah, let's do it.
Clock says you still got 14 seconds, so take your time. You all set?
Yeah, right? Okay, you're on.
Oh, their phones are exact match.
Oh my, I'll keep mine over here.
Yeah.
We will call this Grafton Planning Commission regular meeting to order then. We only have 3 of us, but it is a quorum, so we are going to proceed. Approval of the agenda. Any changes, corrections?
The only thing I wanted to add was the town plan report. We just did an amended version, but I just want to make sure that other commissioners know about it.
Okay, we'll put it just under town plan then and
Perfect.
speak then. And if not, we'll approve through consensus and move. Approval of the regular minutes from the last, oops, I have the wrong date on there. That's supposed to be the August 8th, I think, or 13th, yes, August 13th meeting. Chuck, I didn't check the very next day. It looks like you got these and they were up in the right amount of time on the website
Oh,
this
yeah,
time?
yeah, this time, and I double checked, yeah.
All right, very good, thank you for that. Motion to approve the minutes unless there's changes? Eric, and seconded by
Chris?
Chris, thank you. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Take that off plate, thank you. Public comment? Public, how you doing? Yes.
So, I'd like to raise the situation, which we are all aware of, that Chris is now serving both on the select board and on the planning commission. And congratulations, Chris, on your appointment. I know it's technically not a conflict. It's not an illegal, incompatible situation where some town officials, of course, cannot serve on 2, but this is technically not one of those. However, I do see in reality there being a conflict, because right now the select board and the planning commission are on a very different page with regard to the town plan. And going forward, I could see that this dual position that Chris now has raises a situation which at best is awkward and could be unethical, basically serving 2 masters or having to choose while technically serving on these 2 offices. And I would therefore suggest that Chris recuse himself from any discussion regarding the town plan on the planning commission.
You want to address that?
I'm perfectly willing to, and just for by means of clarification, so you know, my position as a selectman with regards to the town plan, I'm coming from the planning commission. I already voted for a version of the town plan that we approved by consensus here on the planning commission, and that's what I support, and that doesn't change with my move to the select board.
Well, I'm not quite sure that answers my point, in that there still is an ongoing need for discussion about the town plan at the planning commission. I believe from last meeting it was discussed that the planning commission could issue an opinion piece on some of the things that the select board has done in their edits, and I just don't see how you would be able to participate in that discussion and then have a similar discussion on the opposite side of the issue at the select board. I just see that as a real conflict.
Again, I support the work that we did as a commission, planning commission. We achieved consensus. We approved a version of the town plan that we forwarded to the select board. I'm not going to make any edits of my own on the select board. I support the version that I approved as a planning commissioner.
Well, do you support the edits of the select board on which you now serve?
I would have to go edit by edit, but in general, I'm in favor of us passing what the planning commission passed and then worrying about amendments after we have an approved town plan. I think the most critical thing for the town is to have an approved town plan so that we don't incur any liability for not having one.
Well,
And I think, we sent them a 99% solution from the planning commission. And that's my position. I'm not inclined to edit or, necessarily support any of their changes. If it doesn't affect the content, if it's, comma style, or if it doesn't substantively change it, then I'm not inclined to support the edits. The ethical thing for me as a planning commissioner is to stand by the version that I approved.
so the situation will come at the final hearing where you will be required to vote with the select board. You will be required to vote on what the select board has suggested. So are you at this point not willing to say what you will do, because you already know what you're going to be required to vote on? You've seen what the select board has done in their edits. So I feel like you're not answering my question. You know that you will be required to vote
Yes.
at the final hearing,
Yes.
unless you recuse yourself at that one.
Right, which I may do.
Well, but are you now going to participate in the discussion about the town plan on the planning commission? And then participate in the discussion at the select board on opposite sides of the issue?
I'm not sure that I'm on opposite sides of the issue.
I
am at two levels, and I understand there is a conflict and there is a desirability for distance. This is just temporary, and it may be appropriate for me to recuse either at the planning level or at the select board level with regards to the town plan. I would ask the chair if he has a preference with regard to my participation on the planning commission. I think most of the impact I would have henceforth would be at the select board level with regards to the town plan, because that's where it is now. But I will,
My understanding, first off and foremost, is that this is a decision that you need to make because we don't have the power to kick you off, so this is yours. I think the other board members got this email through Bill Kearns from a Susan Senning. Did you guys get this email? Okay, she is an attorney for the Vermont League of Cities and Towns. I'd rather not read the whole thing, but I'll try to read some of the pieces. While 24 VSA 4322 makes a select board member any rural town an ex officio non-voting planning commission member by virtue of his or her office, the statutory provision does not prohibit a select board member from being appointed as a voting member. As you mentioned, and this is talking to Bill, as you mentioned, the statute on incompatible offices also does not prohibit one person from holding both offices. So technically one person can be both a member of the select board and a member of the planning commission. However, while we consider it permitted, we do not consider it advisable. Holding these dual positions present multiple opportunities for the appearance of as well as an actual conflict of interest. And they've got 1, 2, 3 scenarios. Briefly, I'll read them. Planning commissions may be appointed by the select board. Conflict, select board person votes for him or herself as a planning commissioner. I guess that's a reappointment kind of thing. Scenario, if appointed planning commissioners may be removed at any time by unanimous vote, and obviously there's a conflict there because sitting on both. In the third scenario, select boards may vote to adopt town plan and or bylaws. Conflict, select person votes on the very town plan bylaws that he or she had a hand in drafting and approving at the planning commission. So that's the third one is where you're at. And I told you in email, you emailed me that you might be on it. I'm not one to make that decision. You are. So it is legal but unadvisable. It's where it's at. But you're the one that has to.
Yeah,
make
well,
the
that's
call.
the point that I made, that it's legal technically, but it's
Yeah.
not advisable, and it appears
Before,
potentially not ethical. Sorry.
I want to give either of you two a chance, just because it is a board meeting, if you want to speak to it, and then Sam, I'll turn.
I agree with Lisa.
Yeah.
Well, okay, you guys have anything to say?
If you have anything.
I think, Chris, you're walking into a disaster. I think you need to make a decision one way or the other, whether you stay on the planning commission or select board.
Eric?
I would agree with your having to make a decision, not necessarily tonight. And it is not necessarily a decision that has to be moderated just by the planning commission, but also by members of the select board. That you should seek the counsel of both boards in terms of your participation. It's possible you could define a role in both and carefully weed out some of the potential conflicts of interest that we're going to be seeing in the next 6 months or so. That may be a solution. I would hesitate to force you to make a decision tonight. That's just my opinion.
And as I said in an email to you, this is your decision. I think I said to everybody, if it was going to come up, I expected it under new business, which logically, now that I think about it, we should put it in the first, because if you were going to resign, you wouldn't have to sit through a full meeting. We'd let you go home with your family. So, do I understand at this point, tonight, you're not planning on resigning, and therefore this meeting we should move forward?
And that was my intent, yes.
Again, we can disagree with it,
But
I'm not going to force you on it. So,
again, as far as the planning commission, serve at the pleasure of the chair. So,
I would
I'm
fire
not-
them.
I mean, if you had a strong enough opinion that, no.
I mean, my opinion is with them, I think for your sake, you're walking into a beehive that's gonna sting like hell, but, you know, and it's gonna be dicey for you, but it is your call, so.
I'll take it under consideration. I'll discuss with the other board, the
Yeah, I
select
think
board.
that was a very good, call as well, so. All right, Sam, I'm sorry.
I agree with Lisa. And all due respect to Chris, I think he'll do the right thing. I know he'll do the right thing. But he's in a position now where I think it's untenable. I mean, you can't serve two masters, to use that old cliche. And I think right now he's gonna have to. And the town plan, I don't want it to be any more contentious than it is now. And if, you're rolling your eyes, you're right. And it is, and we don't want to go that, at least I don't want to go that way, and I think the majority of people don't want to go down that avenue. So I think it would be best for everything that either Chris, if he would, I mean, it's up to you guys, is to maybe leave one board or the other, or bow out when a certain language comes in, or contentious areas of the town plan come. Basically, the energy chapter is what we're talking about, and maybe the floodplain. So I think Chris will do the right thing, and I think he'll make the right decisions.
Take that into consideration.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, other public comment? We'll move to the next one. Go ahead, yes.
Could I just have confirmation that this is going on the record?
I'm sorry.
Is
There's
this-
the public comments.
That this
Everything
conversation is going on the
Okay, yes.
record?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
That's on film anyway.
It's online anyway.
Yeah.
And to be clear, if it's not been said earlier, this is live,
Yes.
so
Yeah,
watch your language.
yeah, but my point was just about the minutes, that
Yes.
Not just on the video, but on,
So it
but
will be
in the
recorded
minutes.
in the minutes,
Yeah.
public comment, absolutely.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I am neglectful 2.5, 3 weeks ago, and I don't remember who from. I got 2 different letters. I will summarize them as in support of not changing the town plan. I didn't see anything on it that said it was CC'd to the select board, whereas really the ball is in their court right now. And I apologize for that. I will make a point of scanning them, getting out to people, and then we can attach them to the minutes. So they'll be on the website attached to the minutes as part, because they were correspondence to the planning commission. So they do belong in the formal minutes, just like public public comment. All right. If that's all right, we will move on. Wyndham Regional, you just sent an email. What do we got going
No,
on?
there's a couple of things. The thing that I sent out in the email was relative to an energy forum for town and other non-municipal energy committees within the region to gather down at Newbrook in 3rd of October, and the Wyndham Regional Commission, along with the Vermont Natural Resources Council, will be hosting a gathering there to talk about energy issues and functioning of town energy committees in particular. That's one item. The other item is.
Can I ask, what is in Vermont Natural Resources Council? Is that a part of the A&R, a
No.
nonprofit Wyndham Regional, or a commission group? Or who are
No,
they?
they are a private nonprofit.
Okay, thank you.
What time is that on the 3rd?
5:30 to 8. The other bit of information is that someone many of us know who used to work at the Nature Museum in Grafton, who's most recently been involved in helping with the revegetation of riverbanks for stream erosion. Margot Gia has accepted the position of staff member for natural resources at the WRC.
Hey.
Congratulations.
Wow.
Very cool.
She'll be great in that capacity.
She will, you know.
Excellent. All right. Anything else? For now, thank you. DRB?
Nothing to report.
No applications, quiet?
Village wastewater, you've done the tests since the last time we met, but the results are not back, I assume? or-
Retest too?
Yes, we did confirmation test. There were 9 of just under 60, I believe. Total taps were tested in the village. 9 of those came back positive for bacteriological. All of
But
the
within normalcy, correct? According to Mark?
well, it was just a yes, no, the initial, present or not, and then we had confirmation tests, and we've gotten some of those results back. I'm not aware of the aggregate. I know some of them they were all clear. A couple of the ones that were retested were not an issue. I don't know. We'll get the full report before our next meeting at the end of this month, I think the 26th. We hope to have all the results from the initial tests of the bacteriological, the inorganic, and radiological, and then the confirmation testing of the biological ones that did not get a go the first time. And then we'll know, that'll guide our actions going forward on wastewater committee once we know what the full results are of the testing. But we're still waiting on Department of Health for the full results.
Mark Johnson's doing a report for us.
Yes.
And who is he?
What's his company?
He works with RCAP, which is a nonprofit, resources for communities and people. And one of their specific charters is to work with rural communities that do not have municipal water systems and wastewater systems in place. And so he has helped us, led us to the grant money that was available to get this testing done at no cost to either the municipality or the homeowners.
So it's probably too early to ask what the options are, but if I was to ask, one option is do nothing, which is what we have done. What are the other options that you might be considering, or is that too early to ask that?
Well, we're not gonna consider anything, we're just gonna present data to the community.
Oh, okay, you don't have a next step or goal for the committee at this point?
We're not gonna decide to implement water or wastewater or anything like that. That's for the community to decide. We're just gonna present information to the community. So the first phase of our info gathering or data collection was on the water situation. Next, we're gonna be looking at the wastewater situation in the village. And then we can explore other aspects that are interrelated with water and wastewater, such as growth, development, economic development in the village.
Chris, as far as the bacteriological results, have you got any distinction between E. coli and coliform?
Yeah, none of either.
None of either.
None of either. There's no E. coli, no coliform, no fecal contamination from such pools. That wasn't a factor. It was other.
That's significant.
Yeah. So, and that'll be part of the data, the information that we present to the townspeople to inform whatever steps they want to make going forward.
It's interesting, because scientifically you say, well, there is no danger, but it does not eliminate, the lack of evidence does not eliminate that option,
Right,
so.
right.
Let's
And yeah,
be honest
and
about
then the risk we incur moving forward, with all these antiquated grandfathered systems, that'll be part of the data that we present to the community.
All right.
But
The
it'll
bomb is
ultimately
there, but
be.
it hasn't gone off yet.
Good analogy.
Say again, Matt? I didn't-
The bomb is there, but it hasn't
Right.
gone off yet.
Anything else from that committee? If not, we'll move on. Town plan and specifically the report. Chuck?
We had an edit or two from Bill Kearns. Myself and Chair received it, nothing real substance, but he had just a technical legal reference. And I didn't quite catch his gist, Dave. I don't know what you thought, but I just said, you know what, let's run with what Bill said.
I'd be honest, I was kind of in the same boat. I trust Bill. He said there's a couple of nouns and verbs need to be flipped around, and you said you'd be willing to do it. And I
He
said,
did it, and we're done.
And we're good to go. Yeah,
That's
and
perfect.
let's make sure it's as clean and right as it can be. We don't want any hiccups or flaws.
That's right.
So we've made those
But he didn't
corrections.
change any, if you hear about an amendment, there was no change to the substance.
No.
He just, it was like a citation error.
So that should be in Bill's possession now.
Yeah, he made the changes.
Yeah,
I
okay.
think you still have to, if you haven't already, send it to the chair formally, so one chair to the other chair.
I will do that because I have not sent the new one. I'll talk to Bill tomorrow about it, make sure that gets done formally.
Okay, yeah,
And again, it doesn't change the position or anything the select board's doing.
it was just a number change.
Yeah. Other than that, we are on hold with town plan. The date, I believe, is October 15th for the public hearing. 17th, thank you very much, 17th of October. Village center designation, I just wanted, I'm sorry, yes.
Was the addendum to the report from the planning commission forwarded to the Wyndham Regional Commission?
From us?
No, the select board could do it. Our correspondence is strictly
With the select board.
to the select board chair, informing the chair of our belief and its, how it applies to the state law, there are changes, that was it. So we didn't send it to WRC. They did react to one of our comments early on, which is you probably should bring this to WRC now.
It's a strange situation, maybe Chuck can elaborate on it. When the changes came through, what I call now the select board edited document, I immediately got hold of John Bennett and those guys and say, hey, some changes have been made. Can you guys take a look at it and then can we have a conversation? And he was very, actually Chris Campany's the one that responded, formal in his reply in that no, we cannot take a look at these the way the protocol is set up. And again, please stop me or correct me if I'm wrong, we work for the select board now and not you, and there might be a conflict of interest if I worked with the select or with the planning commission and gave the planning commission our opinion of the edits. So the only way we can give our opinion to Grafton as a whole is if the select board asks us. We're not gonna reach out to the select board, that's not the way it works. We can only give our.
To Wyndham Regional Commission.
the Wyndham Regional Commission cannot give their opinion unless the select board asks. They said, if they ask today, we'll talk to them tomorrow and give our opinion. I got an email from Bill Kearns that said they were going to submit it for review. I don't know that that was a formal thing at a meeting though, because I don't know anybody that saw it.
The whole plan or just the report?
No, the whole plan.
So they were going to send the whole plan to
To Wyndham Regional for review. That was, and I can look it up on my phone, 3 weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, at least I think. Have they, or I don't know.
But there's no further word on.
That's the last word I got, is a short email from Bill saying that. Sam?
Chris, could you check on that, since you're the newest member of the select board? Okay, could you see if that was ever sent to the WRC?
Okay.
Thank you.
Anything else for town plan at this point? We'll move on. Village center designations, I started to say, I got in touch with Jeff again down there and said, I don't know when this town plan is gonna be done, but let's make sure the planning commission has everything done so that when the town plan is adopted, we have nothing left to do, which starts with, let's get the map made. He is on vacation to the end of the month. I am meeting with him on the first week probably of October. We don't have a date set. He has the drawing that we did with the boundary, and I was aware but not aware, I guess, and Lisa has talked about it in depth, and it kind of came into full view when I talked to him on the phone. It's not just the boundary. There's a lot more. There's all of the pictures she's taken. There's some other things, and he gave me as an example, just so you can see it. Sam, if you want to grab these, just so you have pictures to look at. Take a look at those. This is just, you got some. This is just Saxon's River's map they submitted to the state for their village center designation. So that's kind of the end product that Jeff is going to do for us. And like I say, it starts with Lisa has emailed me all of those photographs. You've seen, I believe, the hard copies of the photos. I now have digital, and I'm going to go with just a black marker on our map, and I've got to kind of put a legend on it, ABC with arrows, and match them up with the photograph, saying this photograph is picture arrow A, et cetera, et cetera. So that's where that is heading. Any questions on that?
Yeah, so,
Yes.
Dave, when I sent you digitally all the pictures, I realized that some of them are not exactly the way they want them, because they emphasize whole street scenes, like whole sections of the village to be shown in a photo versus just one building. So there are probably some photos there which are just one building, well, could be an important building, town hall.
I know some of the titles were libraries.
Yeah. So I think you probably want to review them again to see if those are exactly the kinds of photos that are the most useful for the purposes of the
And
application.
my plan is to give them all to Jeff, and Jeff and I can talk about it.
Yeah.
So he can be the filter to make those choices. But
Yeah.
I'd rather have too many and eliminate than not enough. So
Right,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's better that way.
Yeah.
All right. And then we'll keep you informed on how that goes. Any questions on the village center designation?
What is the next step for us?
Again, until the adoption of the town plan, we cannot submit it to the state. And so there is a very well written, about a 10-page instruction booklet on how to do it. Lisa's been living with it for 5 years. She knows it inside and out. The map has to be done, and again, Jeff's going to take care of that. We have to bring it back and officially approve that. And then a lot of the documentation is in one big folder that I have that she's given me, and it's just going through that instruction booklet again once we get the map. But as far as I know, the work is done. It's just putting it together in a package to be submitted, except for the map. Lisa, yes, pretty. I think that's it.
I think that's it.
Okay.
I mean, we have the requisite language in the town plan draft, that's like the key piece. Without that, we cannot go forward with the application.
Yeah. So here we go. Sam, if you want, I just gave these guys one of those. I was hesitant to pass this out, and I don't know what you think, and so let me talk for just a little bit, and then I don't know what we do. I had a 35-page survey. You find that funny? Yes, that's a little bit much.
And how much were you gonna pay somebody to take that?
And yeah, that's, there's actually, I got some statistics that say any survey over 10 minutes is generally not going to be completed. And one of the problems is, the less time the survey takes, the less data we can collect. So, ideally, if we could get, everybody in town to take a 3-hour survey, we'll know more than we want to know about this. I went to the process. Let me tell you that, and this is what I got here. I went to many, many websites several months ago during my summer vacation, and I just cut and pasted as many different survey questions into a long list. If you remember, Facein was the town that, in my opinion, had by far the best. And there was even the American Community Survey, which is a national survey through the Federal Census Program, had questions in there. Then I took those questions and I started getting rid of some redundancies, and I started grouping them based on our town plan chapters, land and education and so forth. And then I pretty much forgot about it until I realized I had to get an agenda out a week ago, and I called it back up and I started looking at it again. What I started looking at was first dividing my 30-plus pages of questions into 2 categories. Are they factual questions, like where do you live or how big is your house? That's a factual question, versus opinion questions. Over half the questions were factual. And we can do that. I didn't delete anything. Everything's saved in another document. But it got into, there was 14 questions on what kind of boiler you had to heat your house, kinds of things in there. And so I think one of the most radical changes you'll see to this is, for now, and there's a lot of rearranging to be done possibly, I don't know, I put all the factual questions kind of in the front part of it, and there's very, very few. Many I deleted for kind of what do you want to call it, a statistical wonky thing. There was factual questions about, how kids go into different schools and that kind of thing, and I don't know how we can use that data to create a picture that tells us anything more. And so it seemed to me there was a lot of questions that shouldn't have been in there. As you can see, my factual questions are only about 6 or 8. Then what I did was say, hey, there is a question on my document of 30 on page 8 about what is your opinion about how tight regulations and zoning should be. And then there's another one on page 12, and there's 5 more on page 20. So I started grouping every question that talked about what is you as a community member's opinion on zoning. And you'll see I grouped them all into one hodgepodge there. It's question 12 starting on the page, bottom of page 2. Do you think we should regulate? Yes or no? Then I kind of did the same thing, and this is where Facein came in, and I love the question. It's question 13. They were all over the map, and I don't recommend we create a survey that looks like this. That's not what this is at this point. But where do you want to invest your tax dollars? We got to make it clear. This is not a referendum. This is not a vote. We got to do that legally, but we want some opinions. And that list there is from, again, 15 different pages asking 15 different things. But ultimately, in my opinion, they were asking about where do you want your tax dollars invested is what that group was. The next group is, again, this one came from Facein. There's too much there, and I've got my own comments. You see mine's already marked up after I printed this out this afternoon about, if we were to grow, not that we have a lot of say in it, where do you want to see us grow? Do you want to see a Walmart move in? Do you want to see more bed and breakfast? Some concrete data about opinions about if we're going to have businesses grow, where is it? The next one, there's a sentence structure problem with number 16. Honestly, I've crossed most of it out because it didn't make sense, so I kind of skipped by that. Number 17 is going to be the one that I think, and then I'll look right at Lisa because I know you're passionate about this. I only have 1 or 2 questions about wind, solar, and then I put Solar Ridge in that as well. I did have many more. The way they were worded, you can see mine. I kind of came up with my own definitions. Again, this is not ready for prime time. It is a massively ugly work in progress, but I wanted to show it to you. Number 18 is just a long, long list about how satisfied are you about these aspects. And I just cut and pasted them. This is not my opinion. I just started throwing stuff in there. That's a satisfaction question. You throw it in that category to be discussed later. I'm all the way over to page 7. The order of these is maybe not right, because as I set up this one, I'd like to see this one earlier. What are the greatest assets? Kind of question. I don't want to get into the details of everyone. Number 19, I have no clue what that even means. I personally think I'd throw that one out, but we can talk about that at some point. Number 20, as I read this afternoon, I want to go back and look at that regulated piece and say, number 20 is really more about regulation questions, and again, grouping things to avoid redundancy. Next one is also about satisfaction, more about services. So again, I think this one would be redundant. I think that can be eliminated or greatly reduced. 22 is a hodgepodge, out in left field, but it was in all the surveys, so I threw it in there, is, what's your value and your opinion of how important recreational activities are, and that goes to economic development. There is a page missing from here. I just noticed it. Must not have printed out. And those were the questions, what are the 3 greatest assets? What are the 3 greatest challenges kinds of questions were not in there. So it is 7 o'clock. We've only been in the meeting half an hour. We can adjourn and go home, and you guys can take this home and look at it. Or I would be glad to discuss it as in-depth as you want to, either deleting more, because again, I've got it down to 9 right now, or you say, wait a minute, you should absolutely ask about X, Y, and Z that's not in here. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think this is the right size. I don't think this is excessive, what you have here.
My hope is, and I don't want to interrupt, the goal is when somebody sees that page, they can read that question once, and once they get the flow of it, they can go check, 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 rather than reading a lot of whole new questions. Right. Here's a section, and I do my checks.
Very user friendly.
That was kind of my
this format, yeah. And I don't think it's excessive in terms of the amount. One thing I didn't see was there was a satisfaction with education, but given the controversy surrounding education and the town, maybe we could direct a little bit more towards what people want to see. Do they want to retain their independent school? Do they want to retain school choice? Or how important is...
It's a very good point. I said I just cut and paste this from other towns. That wasn't an issue at the time they wrote their surveys, so I didn't even think of it. But I've got it in there, and let me think about some crafting of that as well. And again, it's a small, casual thing, so as they read it through, if you see anything that stands out or you think should be expanded or clarified or whatever, we can talk about it.
More about the school system. How will you boil the results down for the final look? Are you going to assign numeric values to each of these columns? Or?
I plan on using Google Forms, which is like SurveyMonkey, but free. And each question I have complete control. It shows up, first of all, in a regular Excel spreadsheet, comma deleted text, so I can manipulate it any way you can in Excel. But by default, you can create pie charts and stuff directly from the form on how these results come out. But we can also cross-reference and say, at some point, and I have no problem doing this because this is kind of the thing I like doing actually is, we can cross-reference questions and say, those that answered my primary residence of Grafton is a home also answered this, this, and this on these sections, so we can start looking. And that's one of the reasons I eliminated some of this stuff is I was always looking for never a question alone. How do things interact with other questions kinds of things. So again, it's Google. If you're familiar with Google Drive, it's pretty low-end functionality. But anything in there, if you're not satisfied with it, you can take it to Excel, and then it's a data format. You can do whatever you want with it. Lisa.
Question, Dave. So you have, on page 2, you have part-time residents only. So is the intention that they would answer questions 9, 10, and 11?
And then 12.
But then everybody again continues from question 12, full-time and part-time residents.
The way Google Forms and other online survey systems work, and I'll go back to question 1, and I've got to manipulate it a little bit. If you look at the third answer, it says skip to question. Now, if it's a written document that I hand you a paper document, you've got to manually do that. The way the program works is when I type in these answers,
Then
I have the choice that says if they choose number 3,
then it jumps.
jump down here.
Okay.
And I've got a little flow chart actually I've got drawn on another sheet on how they all come back together again and go on from there.
Yeah. So everybody would answer the remaining questions,
Correct.
whether full-time or,
Yes.
okay,
That is my intention.
okay,
Just those 3 are for part-time.
yeah, okay.
That brings up another question that we did not come to consensus on. I made a call on question 1 that there are 3 primary cohorts that we hope to get answers from, and I threw in this category of other. You know, somebody mentioned as we were kind of brainstorming who should be taking it, well, what about those visitors that just come up for a weekend that don't own a house? I guess they go under other, but we could add other choices besides the 3 primaries that I saw as the primary focus of this. Again, it's up to you. Thoughts?
What's the primary purpose of the survey?
That's a good question.
So for one question for me, which I'm excited about, is sources of energy your home currently uses. We have horrible data with our energy policy, and if we could adjust and move the needle towards more bio-friendly heating options, but we just don't know with the availability of the data right now. We have these statewide and national sample data sets. So that would be a perfect example where it's going to help change our energy chapter, be more targeted.
So better data is one purpose,
Critical, yes.
yeah.
I will speak only for me, and I'm not going to point fingers at any individual in this town, but I have heard more than I want to hear people saying they have the finger on the pulse, so they speak for the community. And legally, the select board speaks for the community. I have my network. You know, I know about 15 people out of the 600 in this whole town, and I know what they think. And you've got your network, and you got your network. Our job is to represent everybody, and hopefully this, again, it's not a mandate. Part of the important thing that we're not ready to discuss is how do we roll this out? How do we get as many people to take it? How do we collect it? But part of that rollout, and I have a whole other document with notes on that, is to make it clear. This is not, whatever you guys end up saying on this, you know, a vote to all of a sudden start investing money on the Grafton swimming pond because that's what you said you wanted to do here. It's a small piece of a very complex puzzle. It's something hopefully we can refer to as we also evolve and develop the new town plan, which is kind of going to be coming. Sam?
Yeah, I didn't read the entire thing. Are landowners included in this? Are they being questioned also? People just own property, raw property? Or should they be excluded, or are they?
You mean that do not live here in town?
Yeah, say I own 50 acres.
Right. Yep. I would say the third choice. My primary residence is somewhere other than Grafton. But if I change it to I own a home or land in Grafton, that would cover them because there are landowners.
Yeah.
I didn't even think of that.
Oh,
I don't have to have a separate
no, I don't think so.
a separate option on that. Yeah,
You can expand on the energy question, to have that be a whole page, you know, when's the last time you insulated your home, when's the last time you replaced your windows, when's the last time you upgraded your lighting?
And we have a lot of those questions. The last 2 meetings ago, I gave you a pretty thick, and not everybody's here. I remember I was sitting up there and did the overhead thing there. And there was a bank of those questions. And again, I have no problem. I'll bring them back out and we can go through that and we can add them in. We can figure out. One of the things that and I'm not saying no, because you're right. It's a big important area. As you can see, there's all these matrices. And I'd like to figure out how to Again, it's always about how do you collect as much data with as little pain as possible. But let me pull those questions up.
And just keep each section simple, just simple questions. I think will give us enough data.
And which, go back, I mean, there's factual questions like, you know, how well insulated is your home, how, you know.
Yeah, so
energy
there's home
costs.
questions based on, how, you know, say there's anywhere from 1 to 5 people living in that home, there's questions on that home.
Mhm.
That you don't want 5 different, you want not 5 people answering the same question.
There's a really important point that I've thought about and do not have a solution to. How do we know that 3 people from the same house didn't fill it out, and does that skew the
So you
data?
need a home section, and then you need an individual, you also need like an individual survey and then a home survey.
2 different surveys. In other words, do you say 1 per household for the home survey at least?
The home survey, which will cover the energy and all the other infrastructure things that the home needs, water, sewer. And then you can have the personal, individual survey. These are the things I like.
Yeah, because the home survey would not have any opinion questions, it's strictly the factual, to describe the profile of your home, the energy efficiency, et cetera. Again, there was a ton of them. I asked you guys, you know, there was a whole section on what is your annual energy cost and all that. And when I read into that, it's like, I'm done with the survey, man. I don't want to look that up, and I don't want to
I
do
remember
that.
we discussed also, having a one-size-fits-all, which I think this would meet the male, which
That's kind of where I was heading with that.
everyone could do that. But to get more data for those who are so inclined, who have the time and the volition to do a more detailed survey, we could have one that goes into detail in specific areas. That might, scare off or dissuade a lot of people.
In today's modern day, is it inappropriate to ask if they are the head of the household
No.
on the survey?
I was just reading about that, well, you can, but it's not advisable anymore, just to put the head of the household.
And I probably wouldn't want to, but if you ask that question, using what I mentioned to her earlier, boom, you send them over and say, okay, for that one head, here's all the questions about the house, and then you go back into the opinion
Yeah,
question.
but then everybody in the household can have different opinions and
Yes.
opinion questions, so.
Well, I'm talking about only the factual
Yeah.
about the home.
Yeah, so what's the intended mode of distribution?
I've got some ideas, we've not discussed that yet. There's a lot of research online on more effective ways and so forth. My opinion, you get the town plan adopted and we get a planning grant and you hire a professional group to go out and explore, door to door and make it and get as much as possible. My opinion only. Can't get that until you get the adoption of the plan though. So.
That would be the most comprehensive, because you really do have a case where some people like to have their opinions recorded and other people don't care a hoot about it. And you really need to have as comprehensive a coverage as you possibly can. And doing it like a census is probably the best way.
It's minor if it was all online. I've talked to Michelle Dolph about, you got the library there. Can we set up some computers and make sure they're there, and she's there to help some of the non-computer literate people through them, but.
I can see a lot of challenges in that approach.
And again, I don't think we're ready to have that discussion. One of them, Chuck, do you guys went both electronic and paper in Rockingham?
We did both, yes.
And
The
so-
electronic was very popular.
So it is an option, and there's gonna be flawed data. How do you know somebody didn't do it 10 times? You really don't, and hopefully people understand that this is for the good of the community, you do it right.
Chuck,
A very important issue to add to the energy, if you're going to expand it, is whether or not someone has had an energy audit. Because just asking for energy costs really don't address the issue of our bad housing stock that is leaky,
Yeah.
and energy audits do.
Well, like I say, I've got a bank of all of these questions. I'll bring all those out, even as a separate document, and kind of address those separately, and I'll make sure it's on the agenda for next time. I'll try and send it out beforehand so you have a chance to review them. There were a lot of questions in it. I don't remember. I think it was Face and asked them all. But, I remember a lot of those. There was, I've got, like I say, 3 pages of septic questions if you want them. You know, there's multiple choice about kinds of septic that I didn't even recognize. Kinds of things, so. Same with transportation, I eliminated a lot of those. There was a lot of questions about, you know, do we want to ask, and it's a judgment call. Should I presume an answer? There was a question about, if the current came through here, which towns would you like it to go to? Well, we can ask that. But to me, it's, you only have so many questions before you burn them out. Is that the one we really care about?
And you're not gonna move the needle on that, whereas we might actually have a
That's a
funding
big point as
program
well.
to retrofit old oil boilers and get them upgraded.
And there's a point, even with what we've got now, I don't want to lose sight of. There may be questions in here that, no matter what people think, we have no control over. Well, if that's the case, do you want to leave those questions in here? Some maybe yes, because you want their opinions, and some, you know what, again, not too much time with it. So. Other questions, comments about this, again, I've got tons of edits already, and I just printed it out this afternoon, and I'm going to continue down this path, is what I'm thinking.
What would be a reasonable expectation for participation? What would define success? If we get a 50% response rate in the community?
That would be wicked high, 10%,
Yeah.
20%.
Yeah, I'd say 10 to 20% is a very high number. And again, you start talking statistics, our overall end is only 600. You know, if we had an overall end of 6,000, 5% would be amazing. So,
We need the higher percentage just for, you know, credibility.
and that's why the rollout is so important. Don't just, you know, put it on the website and put it out on, you know, the Grafton News once, run it for a week and say you got data. You want to build up. You know, maybe you do it around town plan so people can do it at the town plan, around town meeting, because that's when things are aware and going on.
But even that's only going to get you not even 100 people.
Yeah. And the more active people already.
Right. And one of the lessons learned from the wastewater committee, you know, we had, you know, product, literally giving them something for nothing, getting their participation. We had maybe a 50% response rate. And to get that up, we had to go knocking on doors, picking up phones, and, you know, in some cases begging people to participate. Wow. Yeah.
That's your answer, I guess. With giving out free gifts, you only get 50%. So, Lisa,
So this just raises a whole bunch of really good questions, like done in a professional way, which of course would be great, would involve a pretty hefty budget item. So the town then at some point would have to decide in its budget, do we want to spend the money on this? And I don't know if this is probably not even feasible now for this upcoming budget round. It's coming on too soon.
I think it is because in early November, if you remember last year, I was required to go to the select board and present our budget for the following year. My thought would be that when I'm down at the Wyndham Regional Commission would be an ideal time. I can explain my idea right now, again, it's not a final, and say, give me a rough ballpark. You know, if we had $5,000, could we really do a better job than if we had nothing? And if they say yes, then the municipal planning grant is 5% match, 10%, 10% match.
And that's
It's
not much.
10% match.
We would have that within our budget.
Yeah, I put 500 in the proposed budget to the select board saying this is for a grant. In fact, even if we don't know what, I'd like to put that in there with the intent that we might want to take a grant out next fiscal year and we ought to have the money.
Regardless.
It's probably a good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, because then, of course, then the question will be, what is this for? What need does it meet?
Absolutely.
And why should taxpayers pay for this?
And you know, part of it is a cart and horse thing, to be honest with you. You know, the introduction to every one of the surveys I looked at started with, your planning commission is about to start to rewrite its plan. This survey is to help us make some decisions. So we're a little bit backwards, but still I'd like to get the process. And part of it, honestly, is maybe collect some baseline data. So as we get to where we are ready to write the plan, we've already gone through a little bit of dry run with some data collection, and we can do it again, find it and clean it up.
Yeah, and as you have pointed out several times, that the town plan should be constantly amended and evolve as need be, as circumstances change, as there's more information coming out on different subjects. So it should not be a dead document for 8 years at all. So of course, this would serve to inform
Are there areas
any
that,
amendments to the town plan.
are there areas of blind spots that's like, my goodness, why didn't you ask about something? What's missing in here?
Yeah.
It's just big picture stuff. I don't need specific questions unless you've got
Well,
them.
does it hit all the, I think one simple question is, does it hit all the chapters of the town plan?
Yes, with an asterisk. In that some chapters, it hits a lot heavier than others.
Right.
Education is one that I only had about 4 or 5 questions. They weren't strong, they were kind of weak. And so the only time you see education in there, and again, I've got a note to revisit it because of the Act 46 stuff that's going on, is, do you support spending tax money on, and then again, it's in satisfaction. I also have this big note list. The other thing under education is that we cannot rely completely on a survey as our only data collection for this group. And so focus groups and informational interviews with people like the principal, like the PTG, like the board, about their perspective on what's going on is data that should be collected. They're the experts, what's going on. So that's kind of a whole nother layer that's not part of this right now.
RBTC.
So,
RBTC.
yeah, RBTC one, but this, you betcha.
Did you do this in Word or Excel?
This is all Word.
Can you send it out?
Yeah, yes, I will. Yeah,
We can play around with it, cut paste too.
absolutely, yeah. We can know that. Notepad. There it is.
Let's send a survey about doing a survey.
Well, there's an important,
Seeking survey.
at some point, what I'm planning on doing is, when we're generally satisfied with the majority of the content and the meat of this, I am gonna put it into an electronic survey, and I'll send it to you as if you were a regular citizen. Here it is.
Well,
What do
I
you
was
think?
gonna say, we send it out as a test for, have a half a dozen people, just try it out.
Yep,
Take this, make comments
get some
on it.
feedback. Yeah, this is obviously, we're being videotaped. This is not a secret document. I think that's a great idea. We all have our networks, in small talk to people and say, what is it that we're missing, kind of thing. What I'm talking about is probably another thing. You're talking about the content. I am gonna go electronic so you get a feel for it, so we can come to a meeting, you can say, Jesus, Dave, that's way too long and I got real tired of it, or those kinds of things. But the editing of the content is a whole lot easier in Microsoft Word than once you go into the electronic survey system. So I'd rather get it real close in Word before I go to that point, though. So what I will do is maybe throw a couple of questions in there so you can get a sense of what I'm talking about. Again, when I see these matrices, I actually visualize something very clear in my mind of what that screen would look like, because I've played with it a lot in the past. So maybe I'll take 1 or 2 questions and show you what I'm talking about. So, all right. Other questions, comments? Again, I'm gonna keep diddling with it. I'm not gonna lie to you. It's not like I go home every night and play with it. It's usually a week before the meeting when I start working on the agenda. It's like, oh, I gotta do some work on that, and kind of go hard for a week, and then I take a break. So, but I'll get this out to you so you can look at it, play with it, etc. It is Microsoft Word. New business. Hearing none, I will move on. Next regular meeting is Tuesday, October 8th, here at the town garage at 6:30. If there is nothing else, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Chris, thank you.
So,
Very good. Eric seconds, thank you. We are adjourned. Thank you, folks.
thank you.